Hello, Divorce and Beyond family. I've got some exciting news because we have teamed up with Headspace to guide you toward better mental health. With Headspace's meditation, mindfulness tools, and mental health support, you're set for a journey to a happier, healthier you. And there's more because if you sign up through our exclusive link, you'll enjoy 2 weeks of Headspace membership for free. So don't miss out on this opportunity to embrace your well-being. You can check out the show notes for the link or just go to divorcebeyond.com/headspace-Susan. And you'll be able to start your path to peace and joy today. This is just one more way that we can support you on your journey to a better beyond.
Coming up on today's episode of the Divorce and Beyond podcast.
We a lot of times call things in the kid's best interest when it's really in our best interest or our need. I mean, never so clear as it is those, nightly phone calls. Who's the nightly call serving? Is it really serving the child or is it serving the parent that misses the child? And so we have to really separate out what we're really doing for our children and what's really about their needs versus what's about our own.
Hello, and welcome to the Divorce and Beyond podcast. I'm Susan Guthrie, your host. As a top divorce attorney and family law mediator for 30 years, I know what you need to know to get through your divorce, and most importantly, how to move beyond it to thrive and transition to your new future. My experts and I are here to give you the insider view into the process, so listen in for the wisdom and expert information you need on your journey through divorce and beyond. Welcome to today's podcast. I'm Susan Guthrie, your host, and today I have a special episode titled Behind the Scenes in High-Stakes Co-Parenting Cases with Robin Sachs. My friend Robin is a unique blend of attorney and clinical therapist, so she offers unparalleled insights into complex co-parenting dynamics. With over 15 years as a prosecutor specializing in domestic violence and child advocacy, she now dedicates her expertise to helping families navigate high-conflict co-parenting situations. In the episode, Robin will be sharing her behind-the-scenes experiences and strategies that can transform co-parenting challenges into collaborative solutions. So stay tuned for an enlightening conversation that promises to equip you with practical tools and profound insights. So Robin, thank you so much. I'm so glad to finally have you on the show and to be able to dive into this, behind the scenes coaching concept.
Yes. I mean, this is a favorite topic because I think it's really something that while there's a lot of coaches out there and people understand kind of generically what coaches do, I don't think that people utilize coaches as much as they can. And I like to akin kind of the job of being a coach is like being a trainer at the gym. It's like if you go to the gym and you work with a trainer once a month, it's very unlikely you're going to get in really good shape. But if you are in communication with your trainer and you're talking about your diet and you're looking at your holistic life, you have much better chance of lasting results and improving your body.
Well, and I think something you just said there is really important, and it pertains to you in particular. I told you before we started, I think of you as kind of a unicorn in the field because of your unique background and skills. You were just talking about a personal trainer, and you mentioned nutrition and holistic approach and all that. So that's a trainer, right, who has, both the physical know-how to put you through your paces, make you sweat, make you lift some weights, with a nutritional background, so a whole different area of understanding and learning, and then other holistic approaches. That's sort of the holy grail of a trainer, someone who can meet all those different needs. You, in the same way, because of your unique qualifications and education and learning, are sort of that holy grail of coach and guide for families and co-parents going through divorce. So let's talk about your background. That is your secret sauce.
So I tell people all the time. So I'm a lawyer by trade and I'm a therapist. And sometimes, and when I start my informational meetings, which
a real therapist, right? A real therapist.
Licensed clinical social worker, clinical therapist with training, worked like in a psych ward and did all my hours and have my LCSW, that kind of therapist. I tell people all the time, I'm a lawyer and a therapist. And in my work in the divorce world, or what I call my dear co-parent world, I'm both and neither, and then some. And I really come at this. So first of all, by just a way of background, which I always think it's really important when you hire anybody for anything in your life, you really should kind of know how they see the world and where they come to the world from. But even more particularly, if you're having people help navigate divorce or child custody, to kind of understand their framework. So my framework, so I started my career as a prosecutor. I was both in the LA DA's office and the Riverside County DA's office. Through that practice, I did probably about 7 years of my career. I was on a multidisciplinary team where I was a prosecutor for child sexual assault and domestic violence. And the gold standard in criminal prosecution, if you follow any of the crimes, right, if you're doing child sexual assault, is you work as a team. Right. So a kid who is an alleged victim of a crime does not necessarily, have an interview with the detective, have an interview with the DA, have an interview with a social worker, have an interview with medical. That would subject the kids to a lot of multiple interviews. It would probably put the whole process in jeopardy. It would make it more difficult, lots of hands on the case, a whole bunch of people's mythology would be questioned. So the gold standard is really to do a one-stop shop. Right. So in sex crimes, for example, you would bring a child to a place where they have a forensic interviewer and the whole team would gather around and be there to work together. And all of the personnel would be there to work kind of in a collaborative way. So I've taken that model, that multidisciplinary team model, and have applied it to the divorce world in a private setting. There are so many people that are part of the team environment or part of the helpers and the experts that get involved in divorce cases. You've got, child therapists, you've got school therapists, you've got individual lawyers. Sometimes you have minors counsel. Sometimes you have a mediator. Sometimes you have a financial person. Maybe if the kid has an IEP, you have a special ed person that may be involved. And so I use kind of the lawyer and therapeutic side with that prosecutorial team to really help support a case holistically as a group and as a unit. So I tell people, so I'm a lawyer, I'm a therapist, but I'm really like the quarterback on a football team. I can't do it all myself. And even though I have legal skills and legal knowledge and therapeutic skills and therapeutic knowledge, usually people who are going through these processes need a lot of different supports. And one of the critical things is having the train move on the tracks in the same direction. One of the biggest things that I see disrail cases is when you have different kind of professionals kind of come in and kind of jump in and jump out without kind of a cohesive plan.
And that happens actually more often, I think, than people know in cases. I can speak from my, 35 years or so in courtrooms, that when there isn't that quarterback or there isn't that cohesiveness with the team, and it's specifically, I would say, in parenting situations, right? That people sort of are dropped into the case at certain times. You might get, you mentioned an attorney for the children or a GAL or have an evaluator pop in or all that. But it's when there's that thread and someone sort of keeping the team pulled together and all working. I like your train track analogy. So all on the same train, moving toward the same destination where you tend to get the best results, right?
Absolutely. And I tell people all the time, my job, I may be a lawyer, I may be a therapist, but I'm really a GPS system. You tell me where you want to go, and I will try to get you there in the quickest, shortest, least amount of time possible. Knowing that sometimes when you're on the way to a destination, you need a reroute. And sometimes there's construction on the way. And sometimes there's a closed road. And sometimes there's a lot of traffic. But then we constantly, you have to have a plan, but also be adaptable to what the situation is.
Well, I like that analogy because it brings to mind something that I would imagine listeners are thinking. Now, I know you work with both individual parents as well as two parents together, co-parents on the same team. So let's think about the co-parents. Very rarely are they sitting in the front seat of the car with an agreement as to where they're driving, how to drive, what the best way to get there is, should they take the detour on the 5 or get, or whatever that is. One might be a backseat driver. Let's talk about that situation where you're working with both of them. Are you the one driving as the GPS? Are you setting the, sort of direction that they then agree to follow the GPS?
I love the question. And actually, you're going to help me evolve this analogy that I use, because I think, so first of all, I utilize a lot of techniques that I borrow from dialectical behavioral therapy. And dialectical behavioral therapy basically stands for the notion two seemingly opposite things can exist at the same time, right? We can be freezing cold and not in the mood to put on a jacket. We can be starving and not in the mood to eat. So as in my role, I believe that kids and in co-parenting relationships tend to do better when there's boundaries, rules, structure, and consistency. And now I'm going to contradict myself. And this is the dialectic. And need flexibility. And so I try in my work to kind of model that philosophy where I have somewhat of a structure, because I think a structure is what contains people and makes people feel safe. And so I have a structure for the sessions, but I also make sure that there's significant input and buy-in and involvement of the people that I'm working with. The reality is if the clients and if people are going through this don't feel like their needs are being met or things are being heard or they're being heard, they're not going to be interested. At the same time, especially when there's two people, I have to be the one in control. So yes, I am the GPS but they need to agree on where they are going to go. But how and the manner and what speed we're going to drive at and what freeways we may take, I may look at their input, but ultimately in a tie between them and me on clinical, on the how-to, it's me. But I tell them, in a tie between the two of them and me, they win if they're on the same page. So if they agree and they say, listen, we want to take PCH right now, even though it's closed, we're going to take PCH right now because they agree on that. And who cares what Robin says? But if they can't agree on that, then I'm going to jump in.
So that's actually a really interesting point, because you could jump in a variety of different ways using, the analogy, but you could agree with one of them, right? If they don't agree, you might say, I agree with party A or I agree with party B, or you might have route C to take that it may take in certain aspects of both of what they want or not, but it would then be sort of the tiebreaker to keep that car moving forward.
Yes. And I think that the thing is that and especially when I start with people, I try to do a lot of things to join everyone, like things that everybody is going to agree on, right? Like, do we agree that we want our kids to have a healthy childhood? Yes. Do we agree that
we hope?
Right. Yeah. I mean, so far I have not gotten the answer no yet.
Good.
Do we want our children to trust adults? Do we want our children to grow up and be able to have healthy relationships with potential significant others? Once we kind of agree to those foundational things, which generally people agree to, I bring them back to the things. Wait, we've agreed that we all thought that these were important. Let's get back to those goals.
How are we getting there? How are we arriving at that destination the way that we're driving in circles right now?
Right. And recognizing
to our analogy.
Yeah. And recognizing a lot of times, and it's human nature. I'm a mom and a parent, right? We a lot of times call things in the kid's best interest when it's really in our best interest or our need. I mean, never so clear as it is those, nightly phone calls. Who's the nightly call serving? Is it really serving the child, or is it serving the parent that misses the child? And so we have to really separate out what we're really doing for our children and what's really about their needs versus what's about our own.
I'm interested to hear you say that and use that particular example, because again, as a legal professional, a family divorce professional for so long, that is always such a point of contention, the nightly phone call or the parental outreach. And it can be very difficult for parents to understand that is something that's more for them and their comfort level and their feelings about being away from their children than it might be for their children. So how do you, let me just, because you sort of said that, and so I'll detour a bit here with my question, because I think almost anyone out there listening could benefit by what you have to say about this. How do you address that with parents?
Well, I bring it up because it is probably the one issue that comes up every single day in my practice, and probably multiple times. I cannot tell you how many times, and I have my clients create an agenda the night before, and 9 out of 10 people is FaceTime calls when we're away. And again, this is, I want to be very careful because the world's gray. And I think that a lot of people like black and white answers. Yes, this is good. No, that's bad, or what have you. This is a very nuanced area, but I will kind of address some of the complexities with this. One is that I think that the calls can be more stressful for children than parents recognize. And I always ask parents, is the juice worth the squeeze? Think about it from the perspective of the kid. Does a child who knows that the parent that they're with is stressed out about the call really feel comfortable about being able to have the call? Should they be able to have the call? Of course, that would be great. But is it causing undue stress or undue interruption? Or does it make the child miss that other parent? Think about a happily married couple. Your kids go to sleepaway camp. You don't send a note saying, I miss you so much. I can't, I'm crying in bed without you, right? Because it's going to make the kid homesick at sleepaway camp. So you have to think about what you're saying, why you're saying it, what you're really doing. And are you causing a kid who may, be regulated and glued together at the house to then become unregulated and cause issues? So you have to really think about the issue with the kids. Number two, I kind of think about it. It's just when it becomes a thing, right? Like it becomes a thing, like everything gets worked around a call. Everybody has to stop what they're doing. The kid knows about the call. The call didn't happen. The call's missed. The game's playing with the kid. That chaos is just stressful. Calls, in my opinion, it should be like adults having calls, right? Like if I'm in the mood to call my mom, I'm going to call my mom. And if I'm busy, I'm not going to call my mom. And if I want to update my mom, I'm going to call her and talk to her for a couple minutes. If I have time, I won't, right? And so it would be nice in an ideal situation where kids have access to be able to call the non-custodial parent as they wish to check in. And then it's driven by the needs of what the kid has. Now, of course, then it should be ideally looked at also is, sometimes kids use calls to avoid dealing with the parent that they're with, right? So all of these scenarios have to really be looked at. And I think we have to look at it from a kind of honest engine point of view. Are we using the calls to babysit? Are we using the calls because we're lonely? Are we using the calls because we're trying to make everything perfect for our kids? Are they truly check-in calls? Are they necessary? How long can a 2-year-old be on a FaceTime? I mean, some of these things are just ridiculous. And so when it's such a thing, it says to me that it's loaded with things. And, do I think kids should be able to check in with their parents? Absolutely. Should it be something that is stressful and destructive? No. And I think that these calls have taken a life of their own, and they become a huge issue. And I'm seeing more and more judges just doing away with calls. And I think that so long as it becomes a power control thing, it's always going to be a problem.
And that's how it often plays itself out, though, right? As we see, it is a power and control thing, and often. But I really appreciate that you bring the gray to this conversation, because it is not a black and white. And I know for many parents, it feels like a black and white. Well, we can agree that at 5:00 every afternoon or evening, the children will FaceTime with the other parent for 10 minutes. Well, that's great, except for when the kid is at their friend Billy's house down the street, because they're playing like kids do when they're 5 years old or whatever, right? So I think that that's a healthy conversation. And that's what I hear you saying is, right, you're communicating about it far beyond the boundaries of a rather simplistic concept of what I want contact with my child when they're not with me.
Yeah, and let's just be real about ourselves, right? We live in a world where we have a thought on our mind and we send a text and we want a response. And that need, like not everything, and I tell people, it may feel like an emergency, but is it an emergency? Do you really need to know what you're going to buy Susie for the 5-year-old birthday party that's in 10 days from now at 9 o'clock at night on a Wednesday? Probably not. Probably not an emergency, right? And so we live in this, Amazon, get a package the next day,
Oh yeah.
Instacart
Oh
in
yeah.
2 hours, and Netflix on demand. And I'm guilty, right? Yeah, I want to, but I want to get an answer to a question too. But we're not teaching our kids to tolerate sitting in it, right? We can't always get information right away. We can't always check in right away, and it can get destructive and disruptive. And I'll tell you, I mean, I hear all the time parents saying, "Oh, I just want to say goodnight." Like, saying goodnight is probably the worst time to have a check-in call. That we want to get them wound down, ready to bed, not
right, not wound up,
right, and not missing, and not sad, and not whatever else may be going on. So you have to really think about it from a child perspective.
I'm going to take a quick pause here, but don't go away. In the second half, Robin's going to dive into the critical role of communication in high-stakes co-parenting, and she'll reveal common pitfalls that parents often overlook. Plus, she's sharing actionable steps to foster a healthier co-parenting relationship, even in the most challenging circumstances. So you don't want to miss her invaluable insights. And now, a word about one of our sponsors.
There are golden nuggets in every single communication. Things get blown up and highlighted in terms of what communication is. And what happens is that judges, lawyers look at that as this is what they do when the world's not watching. And so it is a missed opportunity in my mind to let your communications be totally an opposite of who you are or how you would testify. If your writings don't match your declarations, you're going to be in big trouble.
Now, let's take a little minute to talk about something special. If you follow me on Instagram, you all know how much I love my evil eye pendant. I love I have my bracelet. I have the pendant that goes around my neck. I wear evil eyes all the time. And so many of you have reached out asking where I got them. I'm thrilled to share with you all, drum roll please, that my favorite jewelry source, Yumi You Jewelry, is now a sponsor of Divorce and Beyond. For me, Yumi You Jewelry is more than just jewelry. The symbols are symbols of strength, individuality, and empowerment. And they handcraft each piece with love and care. And so they are designed to help women stand out and embrace our unique personalities. So whether it's an evil eye like I have chosen for protection, a hamsa for faith, or any other meaningful symbol, their pieces offer beauty and inspiration even during these tough times like divorce. So here's the best part. Yumi You is giving my listeners an exclusive discount if you use the code BEYOND, that's BEYOND, all caps, at checkout. You'll get 20% off your order. 20%. So if you're looking for a meaningful piece to keep you inspired or to protect you during this difficult time, visit divorcebeyond.com/YumiYu. That's YUMIYU. And treat yourself or treat someone you love to something special. You deserve it. Now, let's get back to the second half of the show. Well, and I think it's important for people to know, based on this conversation and just what we've been talking about, is you're not usually brought in and get involved in cases where the parents are the two people who are sitting in the front seat together following the GPS by agreement and all that. You really are brought in those cases where we have some conflict or we have some, difficulty in co-parenting. So maybe we could talk just a little bit about the types of cases and situations that you're most often sought out?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things that I love about my practice is that I've kind of, and this is because I have the lawyer side of me. So I have a little bit of that bossy, bitchy, a little more directive approach, which I'm comfortable
Sure.
leaning into. And sometimes I think that people need just give me the answer at this point, help. And I just tell me what to do, right? So those work sometimes in those kind of more difficult, challenging cases. So I do work with a lot of folks who are completely not aligned. I want a parallel parent. I don't feel safe talking to you. I don't want to be in a Zoom room with you. I don't want to talk to you. And I have a fair amount of those. It's interesting how even relatively good and functional co-parents can trip up over themselves. And a lot of times that I work with those types of people individually, and some of them who have more struggles than others. But I work with also people individually, and I find that one of the things is hard is kind of having insight into our own behavior and having willingness to recognize, like, maybe should do things differently. I tell people all the time, like, if you want to have the same results, just keep doing what you're doing. If you want to do it different, let's experiment with doing it differently and try things on. And so I do that a lot of times with people individually, and I get a lot more mileage out of it because I think people feel safer when they don't have the other co-parent have their eyes on the situation and feel like, oh, I'm being exposed, or oh, I'm wrong, or oh, I'm bad, or oh, I'm a failure, right? As opposed to, we all screw up. We're parents. Like, there is no handbook. It is hard. And I really believe that people generally are doing the best that they can and really are coming from a good place. I really do. I think that sometimes people get misguided and sometimes people don't have the educational knowledge, and not from an educational from like degree point of
Going to school.
but from a, like, we learn by happenstance a lot of our parenting. Oh, you're on a group chat and 20 other moms are doing it this way, or you're on the Facebook group and and every other parent bought their 3-year-old a cell phone, so heck, I'm going to buy him a cell phone too. And oh, every other person does this, right? And it's like, wait, why are we doing this?
And we learn from how we were parented so often and don't even realize that we're perpetuating that. But
oh yeah, that's a favorite. It's like, I turned out okay, and my parents did this. Yeah, and yeah, I turned out okay too. But there's a lot of things that I can look at my parents that could have done differently.
Yeah, and you might have done differently when you knew. And I love that you look at it as everyone is doing the best that they can in the moment most of the time, but we just don't always have the tools. I mean, you and I, as beyond you're a trained mediator, so beyond your law degree and practice as a lawyer, therapist, and therapeutic background, you're also a trained mediator. Any of these roles that you have your education in also have that component of learning new tools, learning new ways to do things. And that's part of what we as professionals do, is help impart some of those tools, especially as a mediator, especially as a therapist, to help people deal with situations that perhaps they just have never been given the tools to use.
Every single day I make mistakes, or I oh, I could have said that. I should have said that. I didn't handle that the best way possible. That was a snarky email. That wasn't my best self, right? And the thing is that we live in a blame society and not really in an accountability society. And it's okay to be like, you know what? Can I have a redo? And I do that. I do that with my clients. Like, I'll think about a session too, and I'm like, you know what? I kind of made a comment that was probably not my best self, and that may have hurt that client's feelings, or I may have said that I was too harsh on them or whatever, and try to make repair. And I think that if we can model, like, you know what, and with our kids, you know what, I'm thinking about last night, and I was thinking about how I kind of blew my top, and I want to say to you that I shouldn't have blown my top. I still don't like that you did A, B, and C, but I didn't handle it properly. And you can fix things. And people just, and you can fix things and make mistakes. And even in really ugly, bad divorce situations, you can make improvements.
You say that, and I still remember, I'm an older woman now, but I remember being about, I don't know, 8 years old, and my mom saying to me, I'm your mom, but I'm not perfect. and I made a mistake. And I remember that, I don't remember much from being 8 years old, but I remember that. And so I love that insight for parents. So I want to make sure that people know, because you do so many different things that help parents, and you do it, you have a plethora of skills and approaches. One of the things that you do for parents is what you call legal ghostwriting. I love that you call it Dear Co-Parent, which I think is fabulous, because communication is a place where, whether you have a good co-parenting relationship or a difficult one, co-parenting communication is probably one of the areas that is not natural. It's a whole new way of learning to communicate with each other, even if you did it well when you were together. So explain a little bit about what your co-parent ghostwriting is.
Well, so first of all, 90%, if not more, of our conflicts with anybody usually has to do with communication. It's how it's said, what's said, what's not said, when it's said, what we've held on to, what anger was loaded with it, what all the stuff, right? So communication is something that always needs work. And one of the things that I find, and I found, I'm going through my own divorce. I remember when I would get like an email in my email box from my ex-husband's, opposing counsel, and it would be like literally have the feeling of like a bomb just went off. What am I going to open up and see now, right? On Christmas Eve at 3:30 p.m. while I'm sitting in Cabo, is this guy sending me an email, and it could totally derail and ruin my whole day. So what I started doing, it was not just for myself, but I would write for myself. I would write as if I was a different person. I kind of had this out of body experience, but then I started writing communications for my friends. People, and it literally started, when you're the first person going through a divorce, people would say, can you write like the note to my ex for me? And so I would have them write, I'd have people write them first, and I would see what people would write. And there would be so much, and I would like redline it. And about 90% of it I'd pull out, and then I'd pull out the nuggets, and then started using, and then rework it in the Bill Eddy Biff way, right? But also with a little bit of my own thoughts. And I started teaching people how to write through modeling writing. And then that kind of philosophy allowed me, it allows me to see what the issues are. Why did this email bother you? Or this OFW or this talking parent? What is it about this? So it's not just that it's rewriting it and writing for people, which, by the way, by me doing that, allows people to offload the most stressful part of co-parenting, which is the communication to someone else. So it's like I get to hold all of the conflict. And it's actually really interesting because like if I'm writing an OFW and I'm then reading an OFW back from the other person, and the person's like, you said blah, blah, I'm like, no, I did not say that. Right. Because I'm the one writing it. Right. So
you,
and so I'm like, that's not what I said, and what have you. And so I can understand the emotional, attachment we have to our writings. But what really kind of pushed it over is when you see that almost every single court document is accompanied by a printout of PDFs of text, of PDFs of emails, of PDFs of OFWs, you realize that there's so much value. And these talk about golden nuggets. There are golden nuggets in every single communication. Things get blown up and highlighted in terms of what communication is. And what happens is that judges, lawyers look at that as this is what they do when the world's not watching. And so it is a missed opportunity in my mind to let your communications be totally an opposite of who you are or how you would testify. If your writings don't match your declarations, you're going to be in big trouble. So it's having that consistency, writing in clear ways, and people will say to me like, oh, I'll write some and you write some. I'm like, we have to start it where I'm writing them. So then the goal is where I'm not needed. I've taught them how to write, and they will usually start sending them to me and say they're written well.
It's sort of builds on what we were talking about a minute ago, where your people don't have the skills and tools, right? They're communicating in a way based upon the feelings that they have in that moment. And often what comes out, because what about trying to co-parent during or after a divorce is full of happy, shiny feelings, is a lot of that will come out in the communications, and people do have that hit send itis, I always called it with clients. Like if I said, before I knew you existed, I would tell clients, draft it, but then put it in a folder and let it sit for a while, or call me and we'll talk about it before you send it, because you're 100% correct. If you send it in its original format, it's going to show up in a courtroom, right? People see the memes on Instagram that say, just assume it's going to be an exhibit in a court when you hit send. It's not wrong. It's true. But what you've done with what you've come up with in this legal ghostwriting and this is co-parent ghostwriting is what I think is so valuable about it, is that you are giving them the tools by seeing you take what they construct and putting it into a format that is a helpful and constructive communication. And so they see what you've done with it. And over time, and part of it is too, I think the emotion starts to come down and de-escalate. They can start to adopt it themselves. And I particularly love that at some point in time, you step out of it because you're not needed anymore to be the ghostwriter.
That's the goal with all of my work. A successful relationship is one where I'm not needed. And I want to be fired, right? Because that people have gotten the skills and moved on. And I tell people, and just kind of going back to the ghostwriting just for 1 second, is, I think our tendency in this world is, fire, aim, ready, right? And so I allow people that and recognize that. I say, why don't you write the email that you really want to write? Just write it, write the OFW back and send, and don't even save it. Send it to me. So then you've done it and you've hit send and you have that experience. And then so then I hold the email. And I also am trying to teach people to sit and tolerate the discomfort of, we're not going to necessarily get this resolved today, because more often than not, it's not. Again, there's very few real emergencies, very few things that need to be responded in that exact minute. But we all are guilty of it. We've all done it. And so if you need to send it to me. And I get a lot of emails of, I know you're going to tell me not to send this, but this is what I draft. And I think it was cathartic for them to spend the time writing it. It's, and then I'm like, you're right.
Don't send it.
Let's hold it for 24 more hours and see where we are. But you're right.
Well, and that's a good point. It's making me think, in one of the roles that I hold professionally, I get a lot of communications from people that in that moment, it feels like an emergency to them. And so the communication that they send to me is, I call it the squeaky wheel emails, right? They squeak, 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 my problem. And then if I don't respond quickly enough, I get squeak, squeak, squeak. Hey, Susan, my problem. And then if I don't respond quickly after that, it's squeak, 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 squeak. So I've started to look at these things, because as a human being, my response is, if someone's squeaking at me with their squeaky wheel, I've got to get the oil out and deal with this right away.
Right. Think about what we're modeling and what we're teaching.
Exactly.
People, right.
So then they keep squeaking, right?
If it works.
That's my point.
Try to put boundaries with those people. And I find it one of the things, and this happens in my office all the time, where someone will be like, I need to meet with Robin right away. And so then my assistant's like, okay, let me try to get you into the schedule. I'm like, okay, this is not a crisis. This can wait, right? And so we take on the energy of our clients, and it happens, and kind of, we have to be able to model, okay, this actually can wait 24 hours. This can't. There are some things that are urgent and time sensitive. It's not everything is, a code blue or code, red, however. And I always, talk about triaging. Let's prioritize what our, problems are. What's a today problem? What's a tomorrow problem? What's a month from now problem? And figure that out. And that's how I structure my agendas when I work with people jointly or individually, is what it's about, thinking in advance. And a lot of times emergencies and urgent situations come about because people avoided dealing with it for so long, and now they have to deal with it. And that's something that needs to be relearned and advanced planning.
Well, and sometimes that's, growth, that's called growth. And that's uncomfortable, right? So there's nothing about this process that is comfortable. And as I mentioned, I've experienced it recently myself with these squeaky wheel communications. But I think that's why it's so valuable for people, is we often don't even have that ability to take that high level look at what we're doing, right? And you have, as the coach, I think an additional value you bring to all of this is, especially with your multi educational background and practice background, to be able to look at what people are experiencing and going through and be able to sort of parse out what is an emergency, what can be triaged, what can be dealt with further down the road, and calm them in that moment so that they can start to relearn. Because unfortunately, a lot of the process that people go through doesn't have, especially I would say in the legal setting, it doesn't have sort of these door stops that will pause things, right? The legal process, just you file the motion, it's going to get dealt with. We're going to have a hearing, something's going to happen. And you're really sort of a professional pause button in a lot of ways.
Well, and I think this is kind of another golden nugget here for you is, how people interact with me and how people interact with my staff teaches me way more about them than what they tell me happens outside. And I will tell you, I do a lot of coaching for people behind the scenes of custody evaluations. So they're in the middle of a custody evaluation and I'll help people prep for them on how to talk and whatever. And the first thing is like, how do you interact with the custody evaluator's case manager or executive assistant? If you're a jerk, I'm telling you that case manager is letting the evaluator know that you were rude, that you were a jerk on the phone. I get that from these people, and that tells me a lot about them. And so I learn more from what people show me than from what people tell me.
And that is a golden nugget, because I think people forget that all the time. They think that there's when the mask is on or they're on their best behavior, that's what is being, looked at through that microscope. I've always told clients going through a divorce, you are 100% of the time in everything that you do while you're going through a divorce under the microscope. It's not just when you're in a courtroom or just when you're on stage, so to speak. It is 100% of the time. And that includes the emails.
That's right. And people say to me all the time, oh, you're going to be fooled by him or you're going to be fooled by her. She presents really well and you're not going to know. Well, I see when they cancel 20 times. I see when they're trying to Zoom from the car and don't acknowledge my Zoom rooms. I see when they're late for appointments. I see how they talk to you in email. I see all of these things.
I would love to be able to keep giving people these insider looks behind that curtain that you're sharing about the process. But I want to make sure people understand all the different ways that you help people. So if you could just sort of run through a quick list of the different sort of interaction and client support that you do. So if someone's out there, looking for that type of support, they know that you're there.
I appreciate it. So I do full service mediation, settling soup to nuts, financial, custody, everything you would think about in mediation. I do individual coaching, both behind the scenes and in front of the scenes. So I will work with people to help prep them for custody evaluations. I'll write their communications. I'll help them become more attuned as parents, kind of parenting 101, helping come up with systems for parallel parenting and co-parenting and so forth, interacting with the team members on an individual basis. I work as a co-parenting therapist, so I'll work with people jointly in all kinds of situations to come up, pre-judgment in terms of temporary plans, how to tell the kids what the scripts are, how to do family meetings, kind of take a family systems approach and do co-parenting post-judgment. If there's a lot of conflict, if there's a lot of stuff going on. I will also act as a parenting plan coordinator or special master to help make recommendations. If I've given the court authority to do that, I act in that way too. I've also acted because of my criminal law / background, and that is the only kind of law that I still practice is in the criminal area. There are cases that are what I call crossover cases, domestic violence, restraining orders, child abuse, domestic criminal cases that fall into CPS land. Sometimes I'm brought in as a consultant on that case or a coach on that case or a case manager on that case, or I've done forensic interviewing. I do wear a lot of different hats. And so try not to confuse people, but I kind of tell people that if I'm not the person, I probably know the person to refer you to.
Well, and you are an amazing resource, but you're also the multi-tool for difficult co-parenting situations in a variety of different ways. And I do want to emphasize to people, we've referenced that you're in California, but I think you work with people nationwide.
I do, and I'm actually licensed in Texas, Washington, D.C., and California, but I work nationwide and actually worldwide in a lot of different types of cases, because fundamentally communication, co-parenting, working together are universal.
Yeah, those aren't jurisdictional issues. So, and what is the best way for people to learn more about you and get in touch with you?
So I have two websites. DearCoParent.com is all things family. RobinSax.com, and that's SAX like saxophone, is my legal website. I'm on Instagram at Dear Co-Parent as well.
Follow her on Instagram. She always has great tips and insights that she shares with people. And I just want everyone to know, of course, I'll have all of these links and information in the show notes, but there's a lot more information on Robin's websites as well. So go there to look. But Robin, thank you so much for giving us this, behind the scenes look at all the different things that you do, and for the golden nuggets, because those are always so helpful to my listeners.
Thank you so much.
Wow, what an incredible conversation with Robin. Before we wrap up, let's highlight some of the biggest golden nuggets from today's episode. Start with golden nugget number 1. Co-parenting is a team sport. You heard Robin share how a multidisciplinary team approach, similar to what's used in high-stakes criminal cases, can make all the difference in divorce. You need the right professionals working together to get the best outcome for you and your kids. Nugget number 2, your emails and texts are Exhibit A. The way you communicate with your co-parent can make or break your case. Every email, text, and Our Family Wizard message is potential evidence. Robin's tip: have a cooling off period before sending. And if you're struggling, consider ghostwriting support to ensure your messages are clear, professional, and court ready. Golden nugget number 3, rethink the nightly call. One of the biggest co-parenting battles: phone calls. Robin pulled back the curtain on why judges are eliminating them and how parents can create a communication plan that actually serves their kids, not just their own emotions. Golden nugget number 4, the power of the pause. Not everything is an emergency. Robin's work proves that learning to pause before reacting can transform conflict and de-escalate drama. A delayed response is often the best response. And finally, golden nugget number 5, self-awareness is key. If you want to improve your co-parenting relationship, start with yourself. Robin reminded us that most people are doing the best they can, but small shifts in our own behavior can create big changes. If you loved today's episode, be sure to follow Robin at DearCoParent.com and on Instagram at DearCoParent for more of her expert insights. And don't forget to subscribe to Divorce and Beyond so you'll never miss another must-hear conversation. Until next time, listeners, remember, your beyond is what you make it. Thank you for joining me today on the Divorce and Beyond podcast. I hope you found some information and inspiration to help you on this journey. Please join me every Monday at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for a new episode. And if you like the show, please take the time to subscribe and leave me a 5-star review on iTunes. You can also find more information on the website at divorceandbeyondpod.com, where you'll find links to the YouTube channel, transcripts of the episodes, and other bonus content. So I'll see you next week to help you move through your divorce and beyond.